Now Morgan was stupid. Everybody knew about it. When he was little, someone would say, "Morgan, come here." And Morgan would run over and they'd say, "Morgan, why is the sky blue?" And Morgan would say, "I don't know." They'd say, "That's because you're stupid." And they'd walk off. "Morgan, Morgan, come here." Morgan would run over and they'd say, "Morgan, why is the grass green?" And Morgan would say, "I don't know." "That's because you're stupid." And they'd walk off. People told Morgan he was stupid so often that when they called him over and asked him a question, he wouldn't say anything because he didn't want them to say he was stupid. And then they'd say, "Ha ha, you're too stupid to talk." And they'd run off. It got to the point that whenever someone asked Morgan a question, his eyes would start to cross, his hands would get all sweaty, his stomach would get all tied up in knots. And even if he wanted to answer, he couldn't get the words out of his mouth. And people would laugh at him to the point where he decided it wasn't worth coming out of his house. So Morgan stayed inside. Well, when he was finally about 6.5 years old, his mother said to him, "Morgan, you're old enough to start school. You know where it is. We pass it all the time when we're coming back and forth from town. Go on down there. Go into school, Morgan." And she gave Morgan his lunch and he went outside and sat on the front porch. His mother found him out there. Like 6 hours later, she said, "Morgan, I was about to come down and get you from school, wondering where you were. Have you been sitting out here all day?" "I have." "Well, why didn't you go to school?" "Well, I'm pretty stupid. I'm probably not going to be able to learn anything." His mother looked at him. She said, "You know, if you've been sitting out here all day with your books and your lunch and you haven't gone anywhere, you are pretty stupid. You better come back inside the house." Morgan's mother never sent him to school a day in his life. She taught him how to read, how to write, how to figure best she could at home. And she got him books so he could read about things from all over the world, and books about math and books about science. And one day she said to him, "Morgan, you're near grown, man. And your father, when he died, God rest him, he left us this house and a garden and a little bit of money. And I'd always thought that we'd be able to save it until you were old enough to work. But heaven help me alive, I don't know if you're going to be smart enough to do that. So I'm going to go to town and get a job. And you stay here and just read and get your books read, okay? Don't touch anything. Please don't burn the house down." Morgan said, "I'm not going to burn the house down, Mother." "Okay, just checking." And so his mother went and she got a job in town. And every morning she'd get up early and she'd take a long walk to town and she'd come back at the end of the day. And when she got home, she'd work the garden, clean the house, cook dinner. Meanwhile, Morgan sat reading. But his heart was heavy. His mother was working as hard as she could to earn money for him. And then she'd come home, work the garden, clean the house, and make supper. One day when she came in, Morgan said to her mother, "I think you should let me clean the house." "Oh, no, Morgan. No, you don't have to worry about that. I will take care of it." "I know, Mother, but you work so hard. Let me take care of the house. Please, let me do it. I'll take care of the house, and then you won't have to do as much work when you get home." She said, "Morgan, love, you remember me saying to you, don't burn the house down?" "Yes, and I won't do it. And besides that, if I'm terrible at keeping house, why, I can always stop." But Morgan was excellent at keeping house. He knew how to keep everything just so. House was clean and put together. It was wonderful. Now, one day his mother came home and she sat with him and she said, Morgan, love." She said, "I've been asking around about your brains. Because you know I'm not going to live forever. You're going to have to take care of yourself eventually." He said, "I know, Mother. Well, there's a magician who lives up on that hill up there, bottom hill, a mountain. And I need you to go up there." And she gave him all the money she'd saved. She said, "You go up there, buy yourself some brains. That's what you do, Morgan." And Morgan said, "Aye, Mother, I will." Well, the next morning, his mother got up and she went off to work. And Morgan, he got up and he went up the mountain. Took him all day to get up there. And when he got up there, there was a little babbling brook running downstream and he jumped over it and there was a gate. He opened the gate. They went some steps and there was a little house. Pop, pop, pop. And the door opened. And standing in the doorway was a wee little man. He had bright red hair and big green eyes, and over his shoulder in the corner, over the fire, was a big pot. Bubbles bursting on the top. And Morgan looked over there at that pot and he thought to himself, "I bet those are my brains cooking away over there." The man said, "Aye, who are you?" "My name's Morgan. I'll bring you some money. I want to buy some brains." And the man said, "Aye, Morgan. I've been expecting you. But look here, young lad. You don't get brains with money. No, you've got to answer a riddle." Morgan said, "Look here, sir. If I could answer riddles, I wouldn't need to buy brains. The man said, "Oh, Morgan, that's the price of the brains. You got to answer a riddle." "I don't want to answer a riddle. I raise some money." "I don't want the money, Morgan. You got to answer me a riddle." "Wait, okay, what's the riddle then?" The man said, "Morgan, what runs without foot, speaks without tongue, and never gets out of its bed?" Morgan tried to think about that. But the brook that was babbling and running downstream behind him was so loud he couldn't think. He said, "I don't know." The man said, "Ah, Morgan, go home. And if you ever come back for brains, don't bring me money. Bring me the heart of the thing you love most in the world. And if it's the right heart, you'll be able to answer the riddle." Morgan turned around. He went down the steps and through the gate and over the babbling brook and home. His mother was waiting for him in the yard. She said, "Morgan, love, did you get your brains?" Morgan said, No, I didn't. He wanted me to answer a riddle, and if I could answer riddles, I wouldn't need to buy brains." He gave his mother the money. She said, "What was the riddle?" He said, "I don't remember." And he went inside. Well, Morgan's mother kept getting up and going to town and coming back. And Morgan, for himself, he was cleaning the house, but he felt bad. His mother was working so hard. And one day when she came home, he said to her mother, "You're getting slower every day, coming home, working that garden. I see you bending your back, working your knees. You shouldn't have to come home and do that. Let me take care of the garden, mother." "Oh, no," she said, "Morgan, this is most of the food we have most of the days. If you kill it, I'm not going to kill it." "Well, you might." "Okay. Tell you what, mother. If I work the garden and I turn out to be bad at it, I will leave it alone. I won't touch it. But let me at least try." Morgan was a genius in the garden. Everything he touched turned out beautiful and perfect. His beans were bigger than everyone else's. His potatoes, people would come over and say, "Morgan, how'd you get those potatoes so big?" And Morgan, well, he was afraid to talk to people, so he wouldn't say anything. They'd walk off and go, "It's a good thing he's lucky because he doesn't know what he's doing." Huh, stupid and lucky. Not such a bad combination. Morgan kept his mouth shut. And his mother came home one day, and she said, "Morgan, I'm sorry you're by yourself all the time. You know," she said, "I'm going to give you a present." And Morgan said, "Aye, what kind of present?" And she said, "A pet." And she bought Morgan a billy goat. And it jumped around the yard. It was the first friend Morgan had ever had. Oh, he loved that creature. And he called it Billy, and it jumped around, and he brushed that billy goat and spoke to that billy goat and laughed with that billy goat. First friend. And one night about 5 years after the last time he'd gone to get his brains, he was watching that thing jumping around, and he thought to himself, "I love that creature more than anything in all the world." For the first time, he started thinking about his brains. So he sat up with that billy goat all night long, brushing it, talking to it. And right before the sun came up, he butchered it, put its heart in a bag, and went up the mountain. He jumped the babbling brook, opened the gate, went up the steps, pop, 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 knocked on the door. Door opened, and there, standing there, was a little man, bright red hair, big green eyes, over his shoulder, big pop, bubbles bursting away. Morgan thought about his brains cooking in that pot, and the man said, "Morgan, you're back." Morgan said, "I am. Have you brought me the heart of the thing you love most in the world?" And Morgan held up a bag. He said, "I brought you the heart of the billy goat. It's the thing I love most in the world. Please give me my brains." "Ah, Morgan, if it's the right heart." "I don't want to answer a riddle. Please, just give me my brains." "If it's the right heart, Morgan, you'll be able to answer the riddle." "Okay," he says, "so what is the riddle?" The man said, "Tell me, Morgan, what kind of bird has no beak, no feet, no feathers, and no wings?" And Morgan tried to think about that. But his hands started to sweat and his eyes started to cross and his stomach got all tied up in knots. And what was worse, the last thing he'd had before he left home that morning was some scrambled eggs. And he was really hungry. He said, "I don't know." The man said, "Morgan, you brought me the wrong heart. Go home. Go home, Morgan." And Morgan turned around and he went down the stairs and through the gate and over the brook and home. When he got home, he said to his mother, "Don't give me any more pets." And time passed. And Morgan's mother was coming home slower and slower and slower. And finally, one night she came in and Morgan sat her down and he said, "Mother, you're working so hard, taking that long walk to town. I think it's time I learned to cook." And she said, "Morgan, look, you can't." "I can, Mother. Trust me, I can do it." "I don't know, Morgan. If you cut your hand off, you're going to bleed to death before anyone can find you." "I'll be fine." And Morgan was a genius in the kitchen. Everything he touched turned out perfectly. The stews, the roasts, everything. It got to the point that when Morgan was cooking, people would stand outside the gate and go, oh. And his mother would come in and they'd say, what's he making for you tonight? And she'll say, I'll tell you in the morning. And she'd go in the house. It got to the point where when she was coming home one night, someone said, do you think he's got anything extra? I'd pay for it. Would you know? Morgan's mother quit her job in town. And all day Morgan would cook. And in the evening, she'd open the window. People would be lined up all across the yard down the lane. And she would sell all the extra food that Morgan had cooked until they had just enough for themselves. And there was always an extra line when she was finished selling all the food. And she'd look out and say, I'd come earlier tomorrow if I was you. Then she'd shut the window. She and Morgan made quite a good living together. Now Morgan, he didn't take the money or talk to people because, he was stupid. But eventually his mother got very sick. And she was near death. And she said to him, Morgan, my love, I'm near death. And after I'm gone, you know what you're going to have to do. And Morgan thought, oh my gosh, he said, I can't do that. You need your brains, Morgan, you need your brains. And not long after that, Morgan's mother died. And they cleaned her up and put her out, and people came to mourn her, to keen and mourn her. And then they were going to bury him in the plot, in the family plot. And Morgan said that they should dig the hole, but he would take care of the rest, and sent everyone home. And he sat up with his mother all night long. And right before the sun came up in the morning, he buried most of her and headed up the mountain with a bag. Jumped the brook, went up the stairs, knocked on the door. The little man opened the door. And there he was with his red hair and green eyes, and over his shoulder, big pot, bubbles, boys bursting on the top. And the man said, you've returned, Morgan. Aye. Have you come for brains? Aye, and I have come for brains, but I brought you the heart of me mother. It's got to be the right heart. Please just give me my brains. Please, please, please. And the man said, Morgan, it doesn't work like that. I'm not answering a riddle today. You must if you want your brains. I can't just give it to you, Morgan. You got to work for it. All right, what's the riddle? And if it's the right heart, I know if it's the right heart, I'll answer the riddles, but what is the riddle? The man said, okay, Morgan, tell me. This thief runs across the ground and peeks in at the shutters and comes down the garden gate and howls down the chimney. What is it, Morgan? And Morgan tried to think about that, but his eyes crossed. And his hands started to sweat and his stomach got all tied up in knots. And what was worse, the wind was howling in the chimney so loud he couldn't think. He said, I don't know. The man said, Morgan, you brought me the wrong heart. Go home. Go home, Morgan. Morgan turned around. Down the steps into the gate and over the brook. Halfway home, he sat down by the side of the road and buried his mother's heart. He just started crying. He didn't know what else to do. And then he heard a sound. Whoom, 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 whoom. And down the road came a girl. She was really different than the girls in his village. She had long hair. But and then he heard a sound. Whoom, 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 whoom. It was a girl. And she was really different from the girls in his village. The girls in his village had long hair. But she had cut her hair. It was short. And the girls in his village, why, they always wore long skirts. Because back in those days, it was even embarrassing for you to see where ladies' legs were. But this one, she had divided her skirts, which is what some of the more forward women did. It meant that she could ride a horse like a man. Absolutely scandalous. She had divided skirts, and she was not a thin girl. No, she was a brawny woman. And the women in his village, in Morgan's village, they often go, hee hee hee. She was not that kind of girl either. She was coming down the way. She saw Morgan sitting there crying. She said, boy, what are you crying for? And despite himself, so surprised that someone was really just talking to him, Morgan told her the whole story of his life. And after a while, she listened to him. She said, no, let me tell you, my name's Mehdi. And it seems to me like you and I, we could help each other out. You see, I want to get a job. I don't want to take care of a house or garden or cook. And you know how to do those other things. Let's get married. We'll take care of each other. Morgan thought that was the best proposal he'd ever get. He said, okay. And Morgan married Mehdi, and they moved into his mother's house. And she went to town and got a job. And when she got home, why, there were people lined up outside the window and all down the way and in the yard going. And she walked into the front yard and she said, excuse me. And all the time Morgan's lived here, not a one of you has had a kind word for him. Just so you know, from this day on, Morgan cooks for me. Get out of my yard. And she went in the house. Morgan and Maidie were quite happy together for 5 years. And one morning, Maidie got up and kissed Morgan on the cheek, and he got up and they made lunch, and he sent her off to work with her lunch, waving bye to her as she left the gate, and he thought to himself, as he watched her go down the road, I love her more than anything in all the world. And for the first time in 5 years, Morgan started thinking about his brains. Now, when Maidie got home over supper, he told her what he was thinking, and she said, well, Morgan, if it's that important to you, we'll do it tomorrow. Which is how he was heading up the mountain that next day with a bag. He jumped the brook, opened the gate, went up the steps, knocked on the door, pom, 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 door open. There was that little man, bright red hair, big green eyes, over shoulder, big pot, bubbles bursting on the top. He said, Morgan, I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Have you brought me the heart of the thing you love most in the world? I have. Is it in that bag? In this bag? No, that's my lunch. Then where is the heart of the thing you love most? Before he could finish, a hand grabbed the door and wrenched it the rest of the way open, and there was Maidie. She said, it's in my heart. My heart is in my chest where it belongs. What do you want? The man said, well, Morgan's been coming here for years to get brains, but if he wants brains, he's got to answer riddles. She said, that's not how it's going to work. You wanted my heart. I will answer the riddles. The man said, all right. Tell me, Maidie, what runs without foot and speaks without tongue and never gets out of its bed. And she said, easy enough. It's the brook babbling and running downstream in the stream bed behind us. Babbling without a tongue, running without a foot in the stream bed. And Morgan said, hi! Any fool could have figured that one out. The man said, all right. Tell me, Maidie, what sort of bird has no beak, no feet, no feathers, and no wings? Maidie said, an egg. An egg's a kind of bird, isn't it? It hasn't got beak, nor feet, nor feathers, nor wings. And Morgan said, aye, an egg, of course, because it's got that shell on it. That's right. Any fool could have figured that out. And the man looked at Morgan and said, well, if any fool can answer him, you answer this last one. This thief runs across the ground and looks into the shutters and comes down the garden gate, and then peeks in the keyhole and howls down the chimney. What is it, Morgan? And Morgan felt that old sickness as his eyes started to cross. And Maidie put her hand on Morgan's shoulder and said, listen to the chimney, love. And he did. And he heard the wind howling in the chimney. And he said, it's the wind. And the man said, Morgan, it is. Well, finally, said Morgan, give me my brains. And the man said, Morgan, all the brains you've ever needed are in your wife's head. Keep her and you'll be fine. Morgan looked at Maidie. And a smile spread across his face, and he started laughing. He said, I guess you're right. And then the man pointed that big pot with the bubbles bursting on the top, and he said, and would you like some vegetable soup? Well, they stayed with the man for a few days, and they went home. And Morgan shut himself inside the house to do some long overdue thinking. And 6 months later, he opened a restaurant. People came from all over to eat Morgan's food. It was delicious. And Morgan, well, he'd read books about everything you could possibly imagine for years. He could talk about anything. He made small talk and banter. He was knowledgeable about stuff. He could talk to you about interesting things. He would argue with several people. And if you paid him for whatever you ate, he'd make the change in his head, give it right back to you. It was amazing. Everyone just talked about Morgan as they left that restaurant. They'd say, why did we ever think that man was stupid? He's got to be one of the smartest men we've ever met in our lives. And Morgan told his children, and his children passed it on to their children, until one of them passed it on to me. Very simply, Morgan would say, don't let anyone tell you who you are. You figure that out for yourself. And that's the story of Morgan and the pot of brains. I have no idea if you heard the clunk clunk clumping up the stairs or the pink pink. I don't know if you did. So, is there someone standing right outside my door or something?
I'm sorry, was that me being too loud?
Pink pink.
Oh, sorry, well, that's true. I was heading over to Devon.
Oh.
So, but also Dwayne called. Nothing urgent. She said you'd call her back. I told you.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I'm sorry if I disturbed you.
Nope, I don't even know if it showed up, but I'm going to do my ending again.
Okay.
They live with people. They do a thing. Okay. You guys are still too loud. All right. I don't know where that happened. I'll give you some. I'll give you some leeway. Let's see my back, kind of in the center. Let's see. Morgan told his children. And now something's going on there. I don't know if you can hear any of this. I hope the last copy was clean, because now everyone has decided to make noise all around me. All right. So Morgan told his children. They told their children. They told their children until one of their children told me. Don't let anyone tell you who you are. You figure that out for yourself. And that story goes out to everyone who's ever had to deal with peer pressure, even as an adult, and especially social media pressure. It's, we're looking at all these images of people doing all these things, and we're wondering, why am I not doing that? Why am my life not like that? My life isn't as exciting as that life. You have no idea what's actually happening. Don't let someone else make you do a thing. You figure out what you want. And that's the story of Morgan and the pot of brains. If you are enjoying yourself, please take a minute to donate to Camp Bethel in the link below. And you can also give tips to the performers. Thank you for being here.
We hope the festival will be back home in person next year and need your help in getting the camp ready to reopen as soon as possible for summer camps, guest groups, and special events like the festival. Please click on the link below and make your contribution toward the work, the fun, and the fellowship that find a home at Camp Bethel. Thanks for watching, and thank you for your gift.